everybody. Welcome back to America TV. My name is Maya. I'm one of the guides at America, and we welcome our audience members joining us online. We truly hope that you are doing well and staying safe amidst this outbreak. Anyway, for those of you who are first-timers here, hi, welcome to America TV for the first time. America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center. Our mission is to provide a space for young generation of Indonesia to learn more about the United States. We have temporarily moved to a solely digital platform so you can enjoy our program from the comfort of your own home and help flatten the curve of COVID-19. Don't forget to leave your questions in the comment box below, and our panelists will answer them later in the seminar. And for our friends here who are joining us through Zoom, I'm just letting you know that there's a couple of features that you can use to actively participate in the seminar. You can use the raise hand section to ask your questions with your video on, or you can also use the chat box section to simply just to say hi to the other participant and also the panelists as well. But don't forget to use these features wisely, right? Cool. Now, today we are going to have a session, the second session actually, about Beyond Silicon Valley supporting entrepreneurship in a global crisis. But you know the drill. Before we begin, we are going to have a social media quiz. You guys ready? Okay. The question is it true or false that the author of Beyond Silicon Valley, Michael E. Goldberg, has spoken about the impact of his MOOC on TEDx? I'll repeat the question one more time. Is it true or false that the author of Beyond Silicon Valley, Michael E. Goldberg, has spoken about the impact of his MOOC on TEDx? You can participate this quiz through our social media comment section. And stay tuned till the end of this program to find out who got the correct answer. One more thing before we begin, please don't hesitate to capture this moment and share your experience through your social media and tag us at AT America. Now, without further ado, joining us our facilitator for today, Ibu Endang and Bapak Gundo. Halo Ibu Endang, Bapak Gundo, how are you doing today?
Hi Maya, we're doing fine. How are you? I hope everything runs well also with you.
Yeah, I'm doing great, Ibu. Thank you.
Hello,
Can
Maya.
you
Yeah.
Hi, Bapak Gundo.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Ibu Endang, Bapak Gundo, can we get a little hint about what are we going to learn today?
All right. Pak Gundo, would you like to share what we are going to learn today?
Yeah. So in the previous session, we talked about the role of governments in supporting, the ecosystem of entrepreneurs, or directly to the entrepreneurs in terms of the policy and funding, access to capital, and all that. And today, given the limitation of the role of government, today we'll talk about the role of philanthropists and also the role of intermediary organizations to help to build the ecosystem of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in the community. Any other things, Endang, that we'd like to discuss today?
Yeah, that's what we covered for today. Right. So we hope that our audience will stay tuned, not only for today's session, but also the following third and the fourth session, that we will reveal all the supports that entrepreneurs could get and how to access it when they start their business or during crisis like we are having now.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, Bu Endang, Bapak Gundo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maya.
Thank you, Maya.
You're welcome.
So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. It's very good to see all of you again today. For today, we're gonna discuss more. We actually will continue what we had discussed before, of course, with bigger topics. So we do hope that you will join us for all the 4 sessions, so you can get the clear picture on what the Beyond Silicon Valley was all about. So here we are back again, Mas Gundo. Happy to see you again after 1 week.
Yes.
How's 1 week doing? So it seems that in Jakarta is getting to new normal.
Yes.
So there are different things happen, I think, so far for the last 1 week. How have you been for the last 1 week?
Yeah, I think now they just at the beginning of the week they just started to open up the malls, and the you see that yesterday even I traveled to visit my parents, and for the
Mm.
first time in 3 months after since the PSBB is conducted, I think it was the first time that I encountered the traffic. So then it took me again another 1.5 hours from Jakarta to BSD, which was before was only 30 minutes, right? So yeah, so hopefully that it will not impact so much on the people will still implement the social distancing rules, wearing masks if outdoors, so that of course we need to live with it, right? So
Yeah.
it's been 3 months and people need to get back to work, people need to make a living. But of course I think with this outbreak, with this virus, we have a new understanding on how to take care of ourselves in terms of the pandemic, right?
Yes. So, well, we have new normal in terms of hygiene, healthcare, and self-care. I think the first thing that gets normal is the traffic in Jakarta. Yeah. So that one thing is inevitable.
Right.
So good to hear from you again.
Yes.
I also have
Same with me. Yeah.
my team has also started resuming some off-site work also since the 1st of June. But yes, we still limit ourselves in terms of schedule and activities. So luckily is because our businesses are built on a cloud platform. So we have already been solely in virtual or online platform ever since we established the business. So that's a good thing for us. So welcome back all the audience. Let me reintroduce ourselves again. My name, you can call me just Ena Ratio. That's a simple one. I'm currently, my most of activity currently is taking care of 2 new startups that I have established since 2018, and also as a co-founder for another nationwide startup. But I still spend times also providing classes, visiting classes on 2 business schools in Indonesia. So that's relatively quite busy schedules for myself, even though during the outbreak of COVID, I spent 18 years previously as a corporate executive. I was CEO for multinational companies before, so it's a new life. So that's the reason why it's I'm very pleased to be able to share with everyone who joined our session here, especially on how starting up a new business and how you can get support for your new business to grow and be more scalable. Mas Gundo, can you highlight a little bit again about yourself so anyone who new to join this session will know us a little bit better?
Right. Okay. Yeah. My name is Gundo Susarjo. Just call me Gundo. So, I've been back to Indonesia for more than 15 years, a bit more than 15 years. Before I was active in academics, doing research and coming back to Indonesia, doing that on the side, and then doing several business ventures, particularly in the energy sectors, and then also in the creative industries. Currently, I've started and leading a research company called Systems Research, which is basically related to my academic background in giving decision support and policy models for policymakers.
Thank you, Mas Gundo. So guys, we have we have complementary background between myself and Pak Gundo. Just like what he mentioned, he has more experience in energy and then creative industry. Myself, my experience is more on small medium enterprise coaching and also on healthcare. And on retail, fast-moving consumer goods. So please, during this session, feel free to ask question at any time. Be happy to ask any question if you like. Boleh tanya pakai bahasa Indonesia, boleh ya, Mas Gundo ya?
Boleh.
Yeah, so don't worry. You can ask question in Bahasa Indonesia, or anyone who join us from outside Indonesia. You are also welcome to ask the questions in any language. I believe our colleagues at America will find a way to translate the question. Should it be in languages that maybe I and Fagundo has not been fluent yet? Yeah. So let's go ahead. So we will have this session until 2 o'clock. Don't worry. If you cannot the whole 2 hours, you cannot watch through Zoom, you can still also join us via Facebook Live, Instagram Live, and you also YouTube streaming from at America. So stay tuned. All right, so let's first recap on what we have discussed last week. So remember, guys, this course Beyond Silicon Valley consists of 4 sessions. The first session was last week on the 10th of June. The second session is today. The third session will be on the 24th of June. And the last session will be on the 1st of July. So every Wednesday at 1 p.m., stay tuned at America, so you can join this very powerful course from, actually initiated by Professor Michael Goldberg from Case Western Reserve University in Ohio. So stay tuned, and every week our session will discuss on different, the same theme, which is entrepreneurship, but different sources of aspects of entrepreneurship, of support. So stay tuned to continue the journey of understanding. We've been told last week that some of our audiences, thank you very much, are aspiring entrepreneurs. Some of them are still in university or even high school students who aspire to be entrepreneurs in the future. But what I would like to say again, entrepreneurship can be started at any age. Don't worry, it can be started at any age.
Correct.
You really have to bring you a diploma or something, because you can start it on any age. My 13-year-old son has started his online shop 2 weeks ago. So that's the first learning for him. Yeah, that's okay. He doesn't produce the product, but he start learning on how to do selling and what sort of administration or processes that he needs to take to help him with the business. So that's what I want to say. Entrepreneurship can start at any age, so you can learn about entrepreneurship at any age also. Okay, so this is the place where age doesn't matter.
Yes, correct. Well,
all right.
If you remember the story of Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? Because Colonel Sanders started the business when he was in the 60s.
In the 60s, yes.
In the 60s, yeah. And
but
after went through several, many failures.
Along the way. Yeah, exactly. And there's also another story about a kid who is 15 years old, right? Who start his business, and by the age of 30, he was one of the Forbes 500 in terms of wealth accumulation. So it can start at any age. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So let's recap first from last week. So last week, we introduced you all to the what's so-called entrepreneurial ecosystem. Yeah. Which means the ecosystem that exists and needed to help entrepreneurs growing throughout the stages of enterprise development. So the big company we see today started from a seed of small activities. Yeah, actually. So that's why it started from stage 1, what we call existence. Then it goes along the way to become big and major companies. Even we talk, let's say, about Apple. Steve Jobs started it in his home garage, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So every large business today was started from small thing.
Yeah, and also Astra, yeah, ba?
And also Astra, exactly. Right. Yeah, by selling what was that? Tempe dan tahu ya kalau nggak salah, kalau if you read the
I can't remember what's the product, but I think Yeah, they started in the. I read the story. I think they started in the garage.
Somewhere in West Java area, yeah.
Right,
And that's the reason also why for historic memorial they built the Cipali Highway.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't know about
to
that.
get through to the Palimanan, to get through
Okay.
to Palimanan, where
Okay.
the founder of Astra was born.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So every large business we know today starts from small. That means every country, every nation needs new entrepreneurs to be created at all times.
Yes.
Right? Because they will be the one who will support the economy in the future. And for them, when they just started, it's not easy. For analogy, like if we put the seed on the soil, it did not immediately grow into a big tree. It takes process and time and delicate attention to make it grow. So therefore, in such vulnerable situations or critical situations, entrepreneurs will need the help from the ecosystem outside them. Yeah. Who are these ecosystem? They are the government, which we have discussed last week. So if you missed our last week's session, you can check at America social media platform to get the recorded session of our last week's session. The second part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem are the philanthropists, which give access to the first initial capital for the entrepreneurs. The third one is intermediary organizations who actually connect between the new entrepreneurs with the funding sources, including the philanthropists. There are also what called anchor institutions. There are also what so-called capital market, which is the large one now we are talking about. And of course, the mentors for the non-financial support. So the rest, if you talk about capital market, philanthropists, and intermediary organization, it's mostly the connections are based on financial transactions. Meanwhile, with the government, it's more on regulation and policy. With the mentors and anchor institution, mostly based on the soft skill and competencies. So I just want to refresh everyone. These are the components of entrepreneurial ecosystems, which we will take you through for these 4 sessions on how each play different roles to help you as new entrepreneurs. Now, for this week, we specifically will share about the role of philanthropists and intermediary organization. So as you can see, next week, we will talk about the other aspects on that ecosystem. Having said that, I will ask our colleagues at America Studio to help us with showing the video from Beyond Silicon Valley course to help us understand a little bit about the role. The first one is we'll be talking about the role of philanthropy. Please.
Hello again, and welcome back to Beyond Silicon Valley. I'm Michael Goldberg. In the last lecture, we talked about government support for entrepreneurship. In this lecture, we'll explore the role of philanthropy and donors in supporting entrepreneurs. Some key points you'll learn about are why donors get involved in supporting entrepreneurs, how donors may differ from government and private investors in terms of the expectations of the organizations they support, and the challenges of maintaining donor interest in entrepreneurship over the long haul. Let's get started. U.S. law allows individuals or corporations to donate money to nonprofit organizations without paying taxes on the money. Oftentimes, these donations are channeled through foundations. Because of Cleveland's economic strength built on the back of entrepreneurs like John Rockefeller in the 1920s and 1930s, several large foundations were created in the city. One of these foundations, the Cleveland Foundation, was the first community foundation in the United States. For years, these foundations supported and protected Cleveland's artistic treasures such as the Cleveland Orchestra and the Cleveland Museum of Art. They had not traditionally focused on economic development. However, this changed in the early 1980s when Cleveland's economy was suffering with the decline of its manufacturing base. In 2002, the government of Ohio started to support entrepreneurship with the creation of the Third Frontier program, which we looked at in depth in our last lecture. Around the same time the Third Frontier program was launched, a number of leading foundations in Northeast Ohio decided to pool resources for economic development and entrepreneurship. The foundations called this new initiative the Fund for Our Economic Future, and it was a philanthropic collaboration program that was truly unique in the United States. David Levine, the founder of Wireless Environment, is one such entrepreneur whose company benefited from philanthropic funding. In 2008, Wireless Environment received a $400,000 investment from Jumpstart, a local venture development organization funded by donors and the state of Ohio's Third Frontier program. David notes the impact that foundations in Cleveland have had in backing entrepreneurs.
At Wireless Environment, we're taking lighting off the grid. So we have two types of products, the Mr. Beams lights that are fully off-grid lights, battery-powered motion sensing lights. And then we have devices that we could put in traditional lighting that will take the lights on and off the grid when it's advantageous. Think of a laptop, but for lighting. What I've noticed in Cleveland, being a newcomer of sorts, foundations that traditionally invested in big staples of the community, such as the Art Museum and the Cleveland Orchestra, are also investing in the entrepreneurial infrastructure. And they're doing that through Jumpstart and other organizations that are private and public. It does a few things. It gives credibility to these organizations that are trying to foster this foundation. It's also putting it in the same realm as something that is for the public good, such as an orchestra or an art museum.
Dorothy Bonnick, the former CEO of Nortec, believes that it is a challenge to convince foundations to invest in entrepreneurs like David Levine.
We have a wonderful orchestra and we have a wonderful art museum and we have all these things that make a wonderful community. But if we didn't have jobs for people and investment in those jobs and in those companies, we weren't going to survive. There would be, no one left to go to the art museum or hear a wonderful orchestra. So the foundations actually recognized that sometime in the early 80s, really at the really taking the lead of the business community that said, you know what, we had at one time, we had over 25 Fortune 500 companies in this community, and now we're down to 10 or 12. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to be the next one to leave.
Founded in 1914, the Cleveland Foundation is the largest community foundation in the United States. Ron Richard is the president and CEO.
So the Cleveland Foundation is unique in a lot of ways, but one thing that's unique about us is our role in the economy in Cleveland, in funding economic development. So for most of the first 100 years, we did what most community foundations do these days, which is funding the arts, social services, and things like that. But we were really the first community foundation and still one of the very few that felt that, heck, if we don't do something about the economy, we won't have an art museum to give money to in 30 years.
The Cleveland Foundation helped start the unique Fund for Our Economic Future. Support of the growth of entrepreneurship was one of the key focus areas of the fund. Brad Whitehead leads the Fund for Our Economic Future.
It is the philanthropic community's response to the long-term economic challenges of facing Northeast Ohio. And so we have some 50-plus members who've pooled their resources, both financial in terms of their time and such, to work on the economic vibrancy of our region through grant making, convening, and sponsoring research. And we do that in collaboration with all the other sectors in the community.
Cleveland used to rely on its corporate leaders to drive economic prosperity and jobs for the region. As these companies moved away, philanthropy provided important leadership to fill the void.
And if we think about the history of how economic development has occurred in greater Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, the old formula had always been, well, let's climb on the backs of the large corporate leaders and expect them to provide the answer. But I think we've come to realize that that model on its own won't be successful in the same way. Power is more diffuse now. It's not just in a core city, it's in an entire region. It's not just in the corporate sector, it's in the entrepreneurial sector as well. It's not just in the business sector, it's spread to a bunch of other groups.
What really galvanized the philanthropic community and led them to take action? Dorothy Bonnet credits the Third Frontier's requirement that there be an outside match in order to access its funding.
So match in all state programs was essential. The state wasn't going to put money into things, especially early stage risky things, if the communities weren't willing to invest with them. It was right about the time of the Third Frontier that the foundations were thinking about getting their own scale in terms of investment in entrepreneurship and innovation, that the Third Frontier was coming along.
The Burton D. Morgan Foundation has been pivotal in building the region's entrepreneurial ecosystem, supporting the startup community, and experiential entrepreneurship education. A legacy of entrepreneur Burton D. Morgan, the foundation leverages its resources to build networks of people, ideas, organizations, and opportunities that foster the entrepreneurial spirit in the region. Deborah Hoover serves as the CEO of the foundation and as chair of the Fund for Our Economic Future.
It's been a really aggressive match requirement on the part of the state of Ohio for our local economic development organizations to access those dollars. But at the end of the day, that's been a really good thing because the dollars coming from the state invested in high-tech startups and in the services to bolster those high-tech startups, it's significant.
Donors tend to be more patient than the private sector and government in seeing their investments in entrepreneurship bear fruit. Bruce Katz of the Brookings Institution believes that the patience of local philanthropy has benefited Northeast Ohio.
I think metropolitan economies are ecosystems. I mean, in the United States, we tend to focus on the celebrity entrepreneur or the charismatic mayor. And the way in which metropolitan economies actually prosper is through these thick ecosystems and networks of advanced research institutions and large companies and small entrepreneurs and investors and institutions that can help train workers and help firms strengthen their business plans, retool their facilities.
Former BioEnterprise CEO Baiju Shah echoes Katz's point of view about philanthropy's willingness to take a long-term view regarding their support of entrepreneurship.
I think you have a real challenge in economic development in sustaining investment in strategies to the point where they have not only proven themselves but can become self-sustaining elements of a region. In our case, you've got multiple actors. You've got government, you've got foundations and philanthropy, and you've also got the business/civic leadership. Government can never be the place where you look to for sustained investment in a strategy because of the short time frames in which they operate due to election cycles.
Brad Whitehead asserts that even though philanthropic support has its advantages, there is another challenge, that of keeping donors engaged and avoiding a syndrome known as donor fatigue.
Now, one of the greatest advantages of philanthropy is that we can take the long view of issues. But like everyone else in the world is that it's tiring to stay with something for so long. And we know that this is work that takes decades. But we find that a big part of our task is to keep it evolving and to keep it interesting so that everyone wants to hang with it.
While foundations in Northeast Ohio have been extremely patient with entrepreneurship programs, Peter Kellner, co-founder of Endeavor, an international organization that supports high-growth entrepreneurship, argues that this is not true with philanthropists from around the world.
Traditional philanthropy is still very broken. It believes it's run by bureaucrats who are box checkers, who are essentially, the metaphor is they like to water a garden, and when something starts growing, they're like, oh, it's growing, let's go somewhere else. What do the best venture capitalists do? And that's how you got to think about it. If you're a philanthropist or an investor, you got to think like a venture capitalist.
Philanthropy is a source of support for entrepreneurs outside the U.S. However, philanthropy or donations come from sources other than foundations internationally. These philanthropic sources typically include foreign governments through their development assistance programs, non-governmental organizations, often abbreviated as NGOs, and corporate donations. Chris Zobris from Vietnam National University believes it is a major challenge to entice donors to support entrepreneurship in Vietnam.
There are a few angel investors who actually do have that more philanthropic kind of bent. You know, they want to, in some ways, give back to the community or the society. But they're very reluctant to step forward and actually actively engage in that kind of activity. Largely because they're worried that if they step forward and start putting money, very prominently into new startups, the various parts of the government is highly political here. We'll take notice of that and we'll say, hey, where'd you get all this money from?
Okay, that's it for this lecture. To recap, the Cleveland case study shows how leveraging government support played a key role in getting donors to fund entrepreneurial initiatives. In other cases, donors work independently from local governments to help foster the creation of startup companies. One important point we learned about donors as investors is they are generally more patient than private sector or government backers of startup companies. But even donors can have their limits, and it is still challenging to keep them engaged when the results of their funding are often best measured over decades. What has been unique about Cleveland is the ability of many foundations and other entities to pool their resources and act together. This takes strong leadership and trust from all parties involved. In our next lecture, we'll be focusing on the formation of intermediary organizations to deliver support to entrepreneurs. These organizations are typically non-governmental or non-profit organizations. Jumpstart, the venture development organization we have discussed in Cleveland, will be featured in the next lecture as an example. See you next time.
Thank you for sharing the video with us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, that helps a little bit on further on what we're talking about. So before I will ask Mas Gundo to share with us about the philanthropist's work and role for entrepreneurs, let me share with our audience first about back to the journey of entrepreneurship back again. So one thing maybe most of people thought that if I started my own business, I have to make myself ready with a bunch of money from my saving or borrowing that will become the capital for the business. All right. That is partially true. Why? Because if your business idea is worthy, you will be able to get extra support from outside of yourself or your family, including in terms of funding. Which means if you have more funding, you will have bigger capacity to scale up your business. Yeah. So normally, yes, when we have the first time we have the business idea and we want to start the business, we will rely on our own money, which we call here self-finance or the founder's equity, the first capital being injected to the business. Let me give you an example. I used to have a mentee because I mentor them. They created, their business idea was to manage paper waste from offices. We know that in many offices we use paper so much, we print documents and other things like that. And not all of those needs to be archived. Some of the big portion of those papers are being wasted. So they created this business, which collecting paper waste from offices, from different towers. And then they create recycled products from those papers. So when they start the business, of course, these 3 young students believe that it has to be started with their own money. So the first time they start collecting their own savings to buy small machines for the production of the paper, the recycled paper, and also they use their own car to pick up the paper waste from different locations, yeah, and they use one of their garage to do the production. So everything was self-financed in the existence. Maybe you can get research grants. For example, if there is a university or a foundation who has interest in environmental issues, they might be helping you with research grants. Because it's called grants, it means it's given to you. You don't really need to repay the amount that you have received. Or you can also have private debt. What are these private debt? You borrow money from your parents, you borrow money from your future parents-in-law. Oh, that's quite challenging, yeah.
Right.
You have to marry the girl first before you can get the loan from the parents-in-law, yeah. So at the very early stage, it started with small amount of capital because the source of capital is also still very limited. If you go to bank, no one is going to accept you. Why? Because bank will require collaterals, right? If you go to wealthy people, who we call it later angel investors, they might not be believing in your ideas yet. Why? Because it was still very early and you have to go through this first stage and come up with proof of concept. So the proof of concept doesn't only mean that you can produce the product. For example, in my case, my student's case was recycled paper. Not only that they are able to create the recycled paper, but also to prove that the operational model of picking up the paper, producing it, and proving that someone will buy the recycled products because the revenue is generated from selling the recycled products. So that's the first stage. So when you start your own business, at the very first stage, normally you have to rely on your own capital, or if lucky, you can get research grants. The second stage of being entrepreneur, once you have your products, the first products being produced, you get your first early customers, it's a survival stage. We also discussed it last week. So what will be different here? As you see, there is one new source of funding that you can access, which is called angel investors or philanthropists, which Agunda will take you through. Who are these people? So on the second stage, because you have proven the first step of operationalizing the business, people start seeing the evidence from your business. You can start talking about your business to somebody else's. Therefore, external parties like angel investors or philanthropists start believing in your business and will be open to invest into your business. The third stage, the business has passed the survival stage. It's growing. That's the success stage. On the success stage, the asset from the business normally has already been scaled up to big enough. So therefore, the founder's equity will have very small fraction. Instead, the capital of the business came more coming from the outside, which are the venture capital companies, the private equity firms, or starting to have bank loans. Why? Because now you have a proven track business. So we will also talk about venture capital and capital market in session 3, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Pak Gundo, yeah? Session 3, we will talk about this private equity firms, venture capital,
right.
and other things.
Mm-hmm.
And going forward, of course, the business going bigger, it's a take-off time. Why it's called take-off? Because normally at this point, the company is ready to go public. So what we call initial public offering or IPO. Mostly, the venture capital, private equity firms will take this as their exit strategy as well, because it's changed from private financing to public financing. So the sources of capital has shifted, yeah, from personal, individual, small organizations, private organizations, and then on stage 4, it become public funding. Of course, also when it's becoming mature, therefore there are more financial products that the business can issue in order to gather more funding coming in. So looking at this again, what we will highlight for today, again, we will talk about financing on the existence and survival stage, where the philanthropist and the intermediary organizations will be the best support that entrepreneurs can get to help them with growing their enterprise or their new business. So, Mas Gundo, would you mind to share with us now what are, because we've seen the video, from Professor Goldberg, what we see there in the U.S., the philanthropy work has been quite established. It's interesting maybe later to discuss on how is it in Indonesia context as well. And we also welcome everyone to ask questions on this topic, Mas Gundo. So please, I give time to you to share with us on the philanthropy work.
Okay. So, philanthropy probably, in the modern times started in the early 20th century when America started, basically the spike of innovations, the creation of capital market that basically propelled the whole industry and basically give many result of individuals or families that are benefited from the rise of the innovations in U.S. innovations. So then you see John D. Rockefeller with the the creation of the modern oil industry, started with kerosene, and they all started in Cleveland, right? Even though he's from New York, but he started Rockefeller started the business in Cleveland in kerosene, and then created the what is so-called the Standard Oil, which was then basically because of the antitrust policy was divided into the 7 companies, or what the so-called 7 sisters. Exxon, Esso, Mobile, and all this, right? And then you have Andrew Carnegie because of the steel industry, and then all these individuals benefiting from the capital markets then realize that out of the ventures they receive all these funds or monies or capitals that are bestowed upon them because of the work they have done, and because of the systems, right? Because capital market money creates money, right? So at one time, I was always giving these examples that at one time you can only eat 3 times a week, 3 times a day, right? You
don't eat more than that, right?
Right. It doesn't go with your wealth. You can, the wealthier you are, you eat more. So at one point there is a limit to actually after you pass the subsistence level, and then you pass the maybe some comfort levels, and at some point there is just a limit, and you still, because of the systems and the work you've done, you still have all this fund coming to you, and then you started to think about other people, right? Because there's one theory saying that it's not necessarily because of the setup of tax system that basically give the incentive for people to give, but it is actually the pleasure of giving itself, right? So because once you started to give to somebody, and then to more people, and then to a community, and to the country, then you started to feel the pleasure of giving, and this will propel the philanthropic work that you have done, right? So I think,
nice. So that's what's referred to the social causes, right? So there is a social contribution actually those philanthropists do in terms of donating their wealth to support new entrepreneurs. Am I correct?
Right. Yes. Because I think well, if you read many of the biography of Bill Gates, I think at one point they also aware that all this money is bestowed upon them probably for a specific reason. It cannot be just to fulfill your self indulgence, right? So basically then you started to see how you want to help people, and you want to maybe in the early 20th century, most of this fund, I think the philanthropies is done for, I would say it is more on the direct impact to the society. Like if you've seen the video, you see the Cleveland Orchestra, probably one of the best orchestra in the world, and then also Cleveland Museum of Art, which is probably it's a free museum. I think it's the best free museum. I think it was at one point the #2 museum in US after Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And then they have the best collection of East Asian history in that museum. I've been to the museum many times, and that museum actually changed my perspective of philosophy and science and arts and cultures and their role, humanity's role in society. So I think those are the impact that these early philanthropies in the beginning of the 20th century started to give donation. Rockefeller Foundation give donation for the arts, and then for the music, for the culture, and then over time started to go outside US, right? And then it started to touch also in science, in education has always been the foremost sectors that they want to contribute, because philanthropies is unique in the way that their role is more on the longer term view compared to government. As one of the gentlemen in the video mentioned, that government has the limitation of election term.
Yes.
In US it's 4 years, here is 5 years. So they recognize the need of an institutions that actually look into beyond
political era
and the regime. I mean the term of government, because there are some policies, and I recognize this with my research background and academic education, in the sense that there are policies that can have an impact very long time in the system. For example, you talk about climate change. Okay, well, if you want to reduce 1 degree Celsius or 2 degrees Celsius maximum by the end of the century, it takes about 100 to 100 years, right? If you act now. So this is why it is very difficult to see the impact, because you don't see it in your lifetime if you do something now, right? So these are the institutions that actually back to the philanthropy, that recognize some of these challenges and then they want to contribute, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So why people have the term angel? So does it mean there are angelic investors and non-angelic investors in the world?
Yeah, well, I'm not too sure the origins of this of this term, but I think it's just an expression. Like if somebody, if you're in difficulties and for some reason you met this person, and then suddenly out of he doesn't know you, he barely know you, he just know you, and then he just have that trust in what you're doing, and suddenly you say, okay, I'll help you, right? And then there's an expression like, oh, you are an angel, right? So probably that's where it comes from. So
because
angel
of the
investors,
help, because of the help that they provided with no theory expectation on the return.
Right. But I think from some of the literature that I read, I think at least that was initially, because initially they just want to help without necessarily look for the return, right? But then at some point, these people also realize that, well, in order to help more, they need to have a return, right?
Yes.
But that return can be helped to other investors. Then it becomes the angel investor is not so angelic anymore.
So
because
maybe we need to highlight here that philanthropists and angel investors are very different with charitable work.
Right.
Yeah, it's very different. Why? Because the venture philanthropists and angel investors are investing in the business because of the belief on the business. It's not just like donation as for example, just a charitable work. They demand for return from the business, which means they will only invest in the business that has that will have good future, in terms of the scale. Why? Because the return that we quote to quote pay back, or the increase in the net of equity will be then given to the next, entrepreneur. So therefore, the cycle of new entrepreneurs growing can be sustained. Otherwise, the money sunk in a dying business, right? So that's why it's becoming very important.
Yeah, I think this is also a recent trend that you will see more and more of this into the future, in the sense that non-profit organization started to see themselves, because of this aspect of sustainability, started to transform themselves to become a social enterprise. A social enterprise is basically what you just said, that they need to maintain the sustainability. They need to aim for the sustainability, and in order for them to to reach the sustainability, they need to have a return in order to be given back for the next scales, or the next phase, or the next investor, the next entrepreneurs, right? So then, hence the term social entrepreneurship, right? Because some of the profit are given back to a social program, or given back to whatever cause that they are aiming in the ventures. Right.
Exactly. So maybe they are called angel because they are willing to provide you with initial capital, for your business when nobody else believes in you yet. Because the business was still very small, right?
Yes, yes.
It doesn't generate large revenues. It's still having very,
very
finger
risky.
counting. The risk is still very high because it was not proven yet. You only have few amount of customers. You have limited competencies on running the business. So they are angelic in that terms, because they believe in you. They believe in your business before somebody else do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also for the, I think we have to remember this, right? If all of this investment, the essential ingredient, they're not necessarily just investing in the business, but they're investing in you. Right?
Yes.
And we see more and more of this idea, of this notion, in the sense, look at, for example, some of the, co-working, you see in the papers, some of the global co-working startup that fail because of the lack of basically the trust is gone in the founders, because they misuse the fund and so on. So I think in the sense, angel investors, they only have the belief in you, in who you are, in your passion, in what you really want to do in your life. I think they start from there, okay? And then after that, of course, depends on the technical side of it, the business, the sustainability, how you make revenues to sustain your business, and all that, right?
Yeah, and of course, in this digital era, every one of us, every individual of us has digital tracks, right? What we call it in Bahasa Indonesia is rekam jejak digital. So digital tracks.
Right.
So previously, maybe before the digital era, the credibility of ourselves as the entrepreneur who came with the business idea and open for seed funding from investors, it's very limited amount of information that people can track down about us in the past.
Right.
So be careful on what you posted in your Facebook or Instagram because you don't know, not only for getting investment, but also when you apply for a job, HR people now will track your social media tracks.
Right.
And then they make assumptions on your personality and your credibility and your trustworthy based on that. So it's very important, and what you mentioned also, Mas Gundo, they actually put the money because they believe in you. And the beliefs into the business is actually secondary, right?
Right.
Because every business has the risk, but the biggest risk is when the founder or when the entrepreneur is a not trustworthy person, then the risk elevates.
Yeah, right. That's correct. Yeah. So are we continuing with the slide now?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm actually interested to ask you to share with us about because in the video it also mentioned about how the donors are actually connected with the government.
Right.
In terms of the policy. How does it work in the established countries, and how does it compare to us in Indonesia?
Yeah, I think Northeast Ohio is very unique, right? I think I lived there for 10 years, and then it's very unique in the sense that the many different aspects of the communities of the region, they have this well, in the sense of they have this coordination between themselves, and they have the awareness between themselves. They're very care into looking into the region as a whole, right? And they want to work together. For example, the fund for our economic future, which is comprised of about 50 to 60 organizations in the region, including university. That includes Case Western Reserve University, the Cleveland Clinic, which is the number one hospital in cardiac, in heart surgery, very well known, and then also the government bodies, regional government bodies. So I think they started, at least they initiate the discussion on looking into jump starting the whole region because of the declining industries in the 80s, 90s. People started to leave the region, go somewhere else. As you can see that there used to be 25 Fortune 500 companies in the region, and then it started to decrease to about 10 now, right? So they want to see how they want to restart this again. Now they have a very good capital, in the sense historical capital, because it's all started in the region with region with John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie in Pittsburgh, and then so they wanna look at that part of history and then see what had been done and what has been changed, and how they try to tailor it to our contemporary issues and government regulations, right? So basically, and with internet, we are able to learn from them, how they work together to create this fund of economic future. All the different foundations, including Cleveland Foundation and Burton Morgan Foundations, that is specifically aimed to grow the entrepreneurship in the area. So I think reflecting this in Indonesia, I think what has been done and what has been progressing in Indonesia for the past 10 or even 20 years since the Reformation era, right? I think you started to see all this regulation on CSR. I think it's going to be the corporate social responsibility that is basically have a mandatory of 4% of state-owned companies to give for social costs, right? For CSR, and then the some of the new law on the foundations, right? I think the more we see what's worked out there, even in Northeast or in US or somewhere else, I think the more we basically we shortcut the learning curve. We shorten the learning curve in order to see what works, what is relevant in our communities, in our country, right? And then we can start something similar. I think the work with the Association of Philanthropy, or they call Philanthropy Indonesia. You can see in their website what they are working for the past 10 years, right? Trying to also work with the intermediary organizations, which we'll talk later on in after the video in the several slides. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mas Gundo. So just to summarize on what we have discussed on this part about the philanthropists and the donors and angel investors, they are still in the same group, yeah, if I may say. They are in the same group because they invested in the business when it's very early, when it's still very risky. The reason why is because they are wealthy. They are actually wealthy enough to not to care about that the return may be just coming back in the next 20 or 30 years, right? Very different behavior to other sources of capital, for example, banks or private equity or venture capital. They possess different behaviors, different investment appetite. So therefore, it's quite different. So it's also interesting when Mas Gundo said that in Cleveland, they have good collaboration also with the governments with regards to that the amount that the corporations or the wealthy individuals contributed to the philanthropy networks or the angel investor networks is giving them a tax incentive also. So their motivation is combination of their social contribution interests, of course, and there is also financial incentives in the tax incentive of the amount that they spend, which we also start to see also in Indonesia, whereby, but it's still now being limited to the state-owned company. Let's say they can record the amount that they donated to startup networks, as which can be displayed in their financial bookings, not yet directly impacting to the tax incentive because they are state-owned company, BUMN we call it in Indonesia, but maybe it has to be expanded towards the private sectors, private corporations as well.
Yeah, currently for private public listed company, it also apply, even though it doesn't specify the amount, right? There's no mandatory amount. So, but it is, I think it's just encouraged. It is encouraged for the public listed company to spend on CSR, right?
Yeah.
Now, maybe this regulation will change over time, I'm sure, because it will adjust to the industry and the environment, the ecosystem, how it works, right? I think, if we talk about philanthropists, angel investors, I think it's just they appear in different stages of the whole journey of entrepreneurship, right?
Yes.
Because when you just started, nobody knows you, nobody believe, maybe very few people believe in you. You need to start something, maybe the family loan, right, or your credit card, right? And then you started to build on that, and then people will see your track record and consistency, and then you can attract, if the idea actually moving up, then you can attract the trust from a bigger organization, right? For example, I've encountered a friend who basically started this startup, and then for some reason he was brought to a very big venture capital company in Japan. I will not name names, but you probably know that it's behind all the big startup in the world. And then they say, they say, "Oh, we like your idea. Okay, come back when you need $1 billion US." So they're not playing small. They want to see the startup, the business, go to a certain level where it makes sense for them to come on board.
So that's why private equity, the capital market, will only be more accessible when the business is already on stage 3 or 4, which is ready to go. But when we are still very early, we work on our footprints. The philanthropists, the angel investors, and the intermediary organizations are the one who can help us. Why? Because we are not that scalable enough yet. So I also have encountered a client also recently that, so they ran a clinic. Okay, they ran a clinic in East Java. The clinic has been quite established for the last 2 years, and now it's time for them to upgrade the clinic into a bigger capacity, which means new laboratory equipments, for example, bigger property to host more patients and things like that. So the same clinic actually have that potential to be upgraded maybe last year, not waiting for the 2 years down the road. But one of the reasons the entrepreneurs in Indonesia has difficulties in scaling up their business is their reluctance to share the equity, to share the ownership of the business with someone else that they don't know. All right. So in this situation, we only talk about philanthropies. When we founded a new business, the ownership of the business might be 100% ours, right? So then come these donors or angel investors who believes in us and is willing to invest in our business. of course, it's very normal that we share some ownership of the business to these people because they invested in us when we are still at the very risky stage, right? So there is also educational effort, I believe, that we need to have also for entrepreneurs in Indonesia on about the structure of ownership.
Yeah.
Because it's two different things. Someone can be shareholders of a business without necessarily involved in the operations of the business, right? The philanthropists, the angel investors, they have no interest actually, and they have no time
right,
to interfere into your operations.
Right.
The operations remain 100% your responsibility. So these are two different roles, as the shareholders and as the manager of the business. Meanwhile, new entrepreneurs normally confuse between the two. Yes, I own the business and I run the business. For example, let me give an example. Let's say I can cook very nice donuts or brownies, something like that. In the very beginning of the business, I'm the chef who cook it. I'm the one who post it in social media and try to sell it, right? And do everything else, including cleaning and dishwashing and everything, right? But if you want to scale up your business from the home into, let's say, having a proper shop in the mall, for example, then you need someone else to help you with that. Including you will need more money also to do that. That's when, as an entrepreneur, we also have to let go some part of our shares to be owned by people who invested in us.
Yeah. I think this is important to talk to mentors, or also, for example, Jumpstart in Northeast Ohio actually providing these services to the early entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs need to understand different mechanism in order to grow the business. Right now, there are many financial mechanism in order to as a remedy to some of the problems that you mentioned just now, Baena. For example, it can be in the form of convertible notes. Okay, it is a loan for until some time, and then if you cannot pay it, then it becomes equity. And then also the understanding of the value of the shares that will increase. Right, it's not necessarily just the percentage, but it's also the value of each share that you have. Right, which is basically the investors are coming in. They want to have returns some point. Right, they want to have an exit somewhere. It can be, you talked about Series A, and then you go to Series B, C, then those in between, they want to exit. So they just capitalize on the value that has been increased by the work of the entrepreneurs. So I think this understanding of the whole mechanism that is available or that is common in the market is very crucial to shape the thinking of the entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So in the bottom line, I mean, for every aspiring entrepreneurs, it is very important for all of us to have financial literacy. That's very important. You cannot have a scalable business without having financial literacy. Yeah,
correct.
Even though you want to use consultant or whatever, but you need to have some financial literacy. That's a must. All right. So the next question will be from all of this, after they hear, there is actually available sources of funding, right? Out there to help me scaling up the business. You will start thinking about what differences it will make in my donut business, for example, or in my vegetables delivery business, let's say, if I have $10,000 from my own saving versus if I have $100,000, which most part of it came from angel investors or philanthropic, right? So that's the question, the scalability question that you need to answer as entrepreneur. What are the differences it makes or it will make into the business when you have $10,000 versus $110? That will be the first challenge or questions to answer before we make decision. Yes, we better open up ourselves to get external investment. Now, the question is, when when you say, yes, the business can do much better with 10 times bigger capital, the next question would be, how can I connect with those owners of capital, right? So let's say you have a good business idea, you already have your proof of concept with stage 1, then how can I get connected with these wealthy people who has excessive amount of money, which is not going to be consumed with 3 times meal a day? Just picking up your analogy.
Right.
So guys, if you are listening to this session, the first thing you have to do is you need to showcase your business idea, right? Because you talk to somebody, a stranger, somebody new who doesn't know you, you need to have a good structure or to showcase your business idea. People call it business plan mostly, yeah? Does it have to be complex? No, it can be simple, but at least it has to be well structured. So I have this good example. So I met someone from the stock market. So the stock market or these capital investors receiving hundreds of business proposals, right? That they will select in between. So they said to me, if someone cannot describe their business idea in 2 minutes, we will not be interested to know further about the business. This is what called elevator pitch, because like imagine we take elevator to go to certain floor, it will consume like 1 or 2 minutes, right, to arrive there. So you only have that chance inside that elevator to explain about your business idea. So if you pass, you can gain the interest within the first 2 minutes, then they will ask you to come back, and then you have a presentation, a proper presentation about your business plan. So so make sure that you can explain your business idea in 2 minutes to get the first interest from the people. And then you can have the proper business plan to showcase your idea. That can be also showcased in innovation exhibition and pitching, because there are many now. Like you mentioned before, Mas Gundo, the state-owned company like Mandiri, Pertamina, and other BUMN, they annually now have some kind like a hackathon, some kind like exhibition for showing, for presenting new business ideas, which if the ideas are meeting the criteria, they will be contacted further for the seed funding, the pre-seed funding, whether in terms of grants or it's in terms of first pre-seed equity or in terms of convertible loan. But again, the entrepreneur has to be clear about what he's doing, what he or she is doing, and be able to communicate it to this audience who have more financial literacies than us. So we will open the Q&A, of course, but I have actually a gift here. So for the most interesting questions for today, I'm going to present them with my ebook on how to create simple business plan. So please drop your questions because you will have the opportunity to win that ebook from me. All the audience, please do drop your questions. Now, the third way to get connected with the philanthropists or the angel investors are through what's so-called intermediary organization, which this will be explained first by a video from Case Western Reserve University. And of course, after the video, we will check on the questions, and also we will also discuss about what the intermediary organization is all about. All right. So I give it back to the At America studio to share with us the video on the intermediary organization.
Okay, good.
Hello again, and welcome back to Beyond Silicon Valley. I'm Michael Goldberg. In the last lecture, we talked about government support for entrepreneurship. In this lecture, we'll explore the role of philanthropy and donors in supporting entrepreneurs. Some key points you'll learn about are why donors get involved in supporting entrepreneurs, how donors may differ from government and private investors in terms of the expectations of the organizations they support, and the challenges of maintaining donor interest in entrepreneurship over the long haul. Let's get started. U.S. law allows individuals or corporations to donate money to nonprofit organizations without paying taxes on the money. Oftentimes, these donations are channeled through foundations. Because of Cleveland's economic strength built on the back of entrepreneurs like John Rockefeller in the 1920s and 1930s, several large foundations were created in the city. One of these foundations, the Cleveland Foundation, was the first community foundation in the United States. For years, these foundations supported and protected Cleveland's artistic treasures such as the Cleveland Orchestra and the Cleveland Museum of Art. They had not traditionally focused on economic development. However, this changed in the early 1980s when Cleveland's economy was suffering with the decline of its manufacturing base. In 2002, the government of Ohio started to support entrepreneurship with the creation of the Third Frontier program, which we looked at in depth in our last lecture. Around the same time the Third Frontier program was launched, a number of leading foundations in Northeast Ohio decided to pool resources for economic development and entrepreneurship. The foundations called this new initiative the Fund for Our Economic Future, and it was a philanthropic collaboration program that was truly unique in the United States. David Levine, the founder of Wireless Environment, is one such entrepreneur whose company benefited from philanthropic funding. In 2008, Wireless Environment received a $400,000 investment from Jumpstart, a local venture development organization funded by donors and the state of Ohio's Third Frontier program. David notes the impact that foundations in Cleveland have had in backing entrepreneurs.
At Wireless Environment, we're taking lighting off the grid. So we have two types of products, the Mr. Beams lights that are fully off-grid lights, battery-powered motion sensing lights. And then we have devices that we could put in traditional lighting that will take the lights on and off the grid when it's advantageous. Think of a laptop, but for lighting. What I've noticed in Cleveland, being a newcomer of sorts, foundations that traditionally invested in big staples of the community, such as the Art Museum and the Cleveland Orchestra, are also investing in the entrepreneurial infrastructure. And they're doing that through Jumpstart and other organizations that are private and public. It does a few things. It gives credibility to these organizations that are trying to foster this foundation. It's also putting it in the same realm as something that is for the public good, such as an orchestra or an art museum.
Dorothy Bonnick, the former CEO of Nortec, believes that it is a challenge to convince foundations to invest in entrepreneurs like David Levine.
We have a wonderful orchestra and we have a wonderful art museum and we have all these things that make a wonderful community. But if we didn't have jobs for people and investment in those jobs and in those companies, we weren't going to survive. There would be, no one left to go to the art museum or hear a wonderful orchestra. So the foundations actually recognized that sometime in the early 80s, really at the really taking the lead of the business community that said, you know what, we had at one time, we had over 25 Fortune 500 companies in this community, and now we're down to 10 or 12. And if we don't do something about it, we're going to be the next one to leave.
Founded in 1914, the Cleveland Foundation is the largest community foundation in the United States. Ron Richard is the president and CEO.
So the Cleveland Foundation is unique in a lot of ways, but one thing that's unique about us is our role in the economy in Cleveland, in funding economic development. So for most of the first 100 years, we did what most community foundations do these days, which is funding the arts, social services, and things like that. But we were really the first community foundation and still one of the very few that felt that, heck, if we don't do something about the economy, we won't have an art museum to give money to in 30 years.
The Cleveland Foundation helped start the unique Fund for Our Economic Future. Support of the growth of entrepreneurship was one of the key focus areas of the fund. Brad Whitehead leads the Fund for Our Economic Future.
It is the philanthropic community's response to the long-term economic challenges of facing Northeast Ohio. And so we have some 50-plus members who've pooled their resources, both financial in terms of their time and such, to work on the economic vibrancy of our region through grant making, convening, and sponsoring research. And we do that in collaboration with all the other sectors in the community.
Cleveland used to rely on its corporate leaders to drive economic prosperity and jobs for the region. As these companies moved away, philanthropy provided important leadership to fill the void.
And if we think about the history of how economic development has occurred in greater Cleveland and Northeast Ohio, the old formula had always been, well, let's climb on the backs of the large corporate leaders and expect them to provide the answer. But I think we've come to realize that that model on its own won't be successful in the same way. Power is more diffuse now. It's not just in a core city, it's in an entire region. It's not just in the corporate sector, it's in the entrepreneurial sector as well. It's not just in the business sector, it's spread to a bunch of other groups.
What really galvanized the philanthropic community and led them to take action? Dorothy Bonnet credits the Third Frontier's requirement that there be an outside match in order to access its funding.
So match in all state programs was essential. The state wasn't going to put money into things, especially early stage risky things, if the communities weren't willing to invest with them. It was right about the time of the Third Frontier that the foundations were thinking about getting their own scale in terms of investment in entrepreneurship and innovation, that the Third Frontier was coming along.
The Burton D. Morgan Foundation has been pivotal in building the region's entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Okay. Sorry about the video. We are going to ask our colleagues at America Studio to play the correct video afterwards. Is it ready now, guys, to be shown? The second video about the intermediary organizations? Okay. So we will share about the intermediary organizations, which is actually the organization that connects between the new entrepreneurs or the people who will need the seed funding with the angel investors or the financial institutions. So it's not only just angel investors, but also further on the later stage, also the financial institutions. So let me share a little bit first about the intermediary organizations. Can you hear me well? I hear feedback on myself.
No, it's good now.
It's good now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is one of the challenge when we have what's so-called online sessions. Yeah, because in the world, Indonesia is not among the best internet connection quality.
Yeah, it's good enough though. It's good enough.
It's good enough though, yeah. But we
Yeah.
still always have this nerve,
Right.
being nervous about whether it's going well or it's presenting well or not. Okay, so while we are waiting for the video to be shown to all of our audience here about the role of intermediary organizations, let's talk a little bit about what is these so-called intermediary organizations. So the way it's called intermediary, which means it's bridging between one side to the other side. Who are these two sides? The one side is the entrepreneurs, the one who started the business or maybe needing to turn around the business. The other side are those who has excess capital or excess of fund. So the intermediary organizations are actually connecting between these two people who don't know each other. Yeah, so who don't know each other. So the role they play is not only just introducing between the two, but normally also they provided services also to help on the entrepreneur side. Why? Because the donors or angel investors are people who have long years of experience doing business, right? They are very fluent in business vocabularies, I may say it that way. So they know every single aspect of the business. Meanwhile, the new entrepreneurs, the young entrepreneurs, are very new. they experience is still very limited. So if there are questions or challenges being asked from the other side, they might not be able to answer it, regardless of how great their business idea is. So therefore, the intermediary organizations normally take the role not only introducing and connecting in terms of financial aspects, but also includes some mentorings also, or selection of the new business ideas, because everybody will say my business idea is great, right? Just like our terms in Indonesia, semua kecap nomor satu ya Mas Gundo.
Yeah, betul.
So my brand is the best. So
Right.
so that's the reason why there is important role being played by the intermediary organizations. So let me know if the video is ready. Please let us know so we can continue with looking at the video on how intermediary organizations play a role for the entrepreneurs. And then we will discuss. I and Mas Gundo also have some information to share about.
Yeah, I think I want to add more also on the discussion or the role of intermediate organizations. I think the philanthropists, the donors, they're coming up with the fund, right? And already big work in the sense like, they're looking into what are the sectors that they would interested to invest, and basically recognizing the individuals or the work that has been already in the market, right? Those are already big work, and then to go into the other details or the next phase on basically the due diligence of the entrepreneurs, and then the the question and answers on the business models and all that. So they do not want to go into that stage, right? So there is a gap in between because it's a long journey. So there is a gap in between that is actually where all these intermediate organizations plays a role, right? In basically giving mentoring, giving a business service, for example, how to protect your brand, the IP, right? And then how to do a marketing campaign, right? So those are the details, okay? So I think this is why the intermediary organization plays a crucial role in the development of the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah. So even what I see in today's world, the work has been done more by these intermediary organizations rather than individual investors. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So please do not expect that we will see these wealthy people who are listed in the Forbes 500 personally, because in the past that was achievement. Yeah, if we can meet someone,
right.
Someone like sometimes your business card says something about who, right?
Right.
Who's person.
Well, Baena, I can share you some interesting fact.
Okay.
That I always share this with my friends. I have one time I've known a person who lived on the interest of his interest. Yeah. So what do you want to do?
How's
right?
that?
so you live on the interest of your interest, right? So you can imagine like So basically, it's very interesting, when you meet all these people and then they have a, in one of the classic Hollywood movies, right? They say, the rich are different than the rest of us, right? So it's just a different mindset, right? So well, I think coming back is very interesting. After the video that we'll talk about the development of philanthropic activities in Indonesia, and then also the fact that, do you know that Indonesia is voted by the Giving Index as the most generous people in the world, number one.
Yes.
So actually, in fact, in our culture, the so-called gotong royong, right, which is basically to help each other, this altruism philosophy actually has been existed for centuries in our culture. So I think that even though it is unstructured, right, and it's not modern, so I think with this modernization of philanthropic way, I think it is a very good news that that the gotong royong thing is already in the culture, and people, when this is structured, how you can imagine how it will have a greater impact to the society in Indonesia.
Yeah, that's true. So while we are waiting for the video to be ready to be shown to all the audience, I would like to pick up one question that we received from the social media. So thank you for those who have shared the questions. Let me check one of the questions that we have received.
Yeah, we can start from the one from Twitter. Yeah, but
yeah. Just want to check my share is not my screen is not shared right now, right?
No.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So there is this very good question. How much time is commonly expected by donors or philanthropists from the business recipients to be able to finally make profit? Mas Gundo, can you help with these questions? Very good questions.
How much time is commonly expected by donors, philanthropists from? Okay. Well, I cannot give a specific time because there is, the aim for different investors or philanthropies is, of course, different from each of them, right? They can look for the social impact or the so-called impact investors, right? So I think as we discussed last week, yeah, Mbak Enna, I think this is the best time for entrepreneurs to actually, given the rise of the widespread of ICT technology, internet, you can actually see the prior to the meetup, what are the aim for the investors, whether they're looking for social impact entrepreneurs, whether they're looking for high return, right? So I think there's no rule on how much time. Professor Goldberg mentioned about the donor fatigue, right? Which is basically after investing for maybe 1 decade, 10 or maybe some years, and then they started to get bored with the idea, and then maybe move on to somewhere else, some other entrepreneurs or some other ventures. So I think this if you don't I think my suggestion is don't really worry, don't get worried about this aspect. Okay, it can always be communicated from the beginning, and donors are not necessarily, or philanthropists especially, are not necessarily investing in you because they want to see fast return. Okay, there are some of them, of course, but also because how is it aligned with your purpose of why you're making all this?
Okay.
So I think that's.
What I learned is the more experienced an angel investor is, the more patience they have. The new angel investors are normally the one who wants to get a quick return, as if a debt collector.
Right.
Yeah, so that's what I want to say. But I mean, again, about the amount of time, we call it as a payback period. Yeah, payback period means the amount of time that the business can start making net profit that compensated the investment. Yeah, so that's the payback period. So the length of the payback period are different for different industries. For example, if we talk about energy, if you invest in energy, then the payback period might be quite long. But if you invest in fast-moving consumer goods, the payback period is relatively shorter. Or in creative business, the payback period is relatively shorter. So all those timeline expectations needs to be expressed in your business plan. Why? Because it's actually a function of investment and profit that will determine the amount of time. Okay, so let's have a few minutes, the next few minutes, to look at the video about the intermediate organizations before
the correct video.
The correct video. So we apologize for the previous video being replayed 2 times. So this one is the correct video. So I hope everyone don't mind with a few time extensions to look into this next video. I hand it over to at America to play the video for us. Thank you.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Silicon Valley. I'm Michael Goldberg. In the previous lectures, we learned about the important role that government and donors can play in the formation of new high-growth companies. In Cleveland, government and donors committed significant resources to back entrepreneurs, but leaders quickly realized that an organization was needed to appropriately and wisely deploy this investment into private companies. Modeled on a program called Innovation Works in Pittsburgh, Jumpstart was created in 2004 as a venture development nonprofit organization to support innovative startup companies by providing pre-seed funding, developing networks of angel investors, and making connections for follow-on funding with venture capital firms. Jumpstart also provides technical assistance and support to help entrepreneurs develop their business plans, connect to mentors, and attract the necessary talent to manage and grow their companies. But creating and staffing an intermediary organization with talented leaders from the private sector would take significant resources. To date, Jumpstart has received over $75 million in funds to deliver its programs. In this lecture, you will learn why Cleveland created an organization like Jumpstart to support entrepreneurship, how an intermediary organization measures success, and what challenges it faces. Laura Bennett, the founder of Embrace Pet Insurance, was the first entrepreneur to receive an investment from Jumpstart.
What we do is we sell and we design, sell pet health insurance for cats and dogs across the United States. And our product covers the unexpected bills, like anything from an ear infection through to cancer treatments, which can be very, very expensive, to the usual stuff like regular vet visits and so on. We started off with 2 people with a business plan. We're now very close to 50 people. So when I first moved to Cleveland, which was back in 2004, there was nothing here for entrepreneurs, or at least it was very minimal. And in fact, when we first spoke to Jumpstart, was literally they were first forming. We met in a coffee shop because they didn't have any offices. And so the entrepreneurship environment has developed since then. Back then there were no angel funds. Now there's at least one. There were no accelerators. Those have only occurred in the last couple of years. So it was really forming at that time. There was nothing. So over that time, over the last 10 years, a lot has changed.
While there were resources available from government and donor sources in Cleveland to support entrepreneurship, funders believed that it was necessary to create an intermediary not-for-profit organization. Jackie Atcho and Dorothy Bonnick were 2 leaders in Cleveland that advocated for the creation of Jumpstart.
When you've got an economy that doesn't really have a market at the early stage and you're trying to create a market, when there's not a market, private money is not going to flow in, nor will private services and the things that would need to support those kinds of businesses. The government could try to directly invest, but they're not really well suited to do that. A lot of it was an experiment. And so we had to create intermediaries that were capable of innovating the way that the support and the money would flow to companies.
So if you look at intermediary organizations, they're really the intermediaries between the research base or the idea generation base and the marketplace. And you put them in place because the market system isn't working. There's not a natural way for these ideas to get to market. So when you have lost the natural pathways for that, you put in an intervention, an intermediary. And we did that for entrepreneurship. We did that for specific industries like biomedical or materials, or even manufacturing, because manufacturing was changing overnight in the midst of all of this.
Since its founding in 2004, Jumpstart has evolved to respond to what it perceives as the needs of the local entrepreneurs and the demands of its funders, including the Third Frontier and philanthropic donors like the Fund for Our Economic Future. Ray Leach is Jumpstart's CEO.
So one of the things I think that's really neat and was very unusual 10 years ago, it's a little less unusual now, is that Jumpstart was created as a not-for-profit organization, an NGO, whose principal focus was leveraging kind of a venture capital expertise model, but doing it for economic development outcomes. So all of our activity from day one wasn't to maximize profits for the institution or even for our supporters. It was to create a wave of momentum and create acceleration around company formation and the ability of those companies to be able to attract capital.
Anthony Hughes runs Jumpstart's mentoring program.
You know, Northeast Ohio was a very vibrant ecosystem in the early 1900s. We unfortunately took a real hit with globalization and the decline in manufacturing in North America, and so our ecosystem was fairly barren. Now, the notion or the analogy that I think is most appropriate for a place like Northeast Ohio is this notion of an artificial reef. The ecosystem didn't really exist when we started to focus heavily on how to build an ecosystem or rebuild an ecosystem. And so in some capacity, Jumpstart is like an artificial reef. It's an artificial construct on which an ecosystem can rebuild itself.
In 10 years, Jumpstart has invested nearly $30 million directly into its 76 startup companies through its investment fund. Jumpstart provides funding at the seed capital stage when it is extremely critical for capital to be locally available. Jumpstart's fund is structured as what is known as an evergreen, which means any investment gains that it makes on its portfolio companies gets put back into the fund to be invested in new companies.
So one of the philosophies that we have at Jumpstart that I think is true everywhere is you need a balance of both capital and technical assistance or mentoring and coaching. And one of the most important vehicles that Jumpstart was able to create in the early days is what we call our Evergreen Fund, which was ultimately has ended up being a pool of $30 million. About 60% of that has come from the state and public sector entities, and 40% has come from private foundations and community leaders that enable us to take the dollars in as philanthropy, and then with those dollars make very, very risk-friendly and yet still high-risk investments in entrepreneurs who've never raised capital before.
Ray references Jumpstart's fund beginning to see some initial returns on its investments, which occur when a company is sold or has an initial public offering. It has been difficult, not just in Cleveland, but worldwide, for any early-stage company to make an exit. And as a result, the returns for venture capital as an asset class over the past decade have been weak. Jumpstart is still waiting for a sizable exit from their portfolio. Jackie Atcho serves on Jumpstart's board of directors.
I think Jumpstart has to have exits to be a success, but I don't think it needs a Groupon-like exit. In fact, I don't think that's the way economies are built. I think it's built on many more smaller exits and successes, and I think those are in the coming. You know, it's been 7 years or so since it started, so it does take time for these things to mature.
While exits are a key metric Jumpstart's funders use to measure their effectiveness, other measurements of success include the ability of Jumpstart's portfolio to raise capital, to generate revenue, and to create jobs. Cleveland's entrepreneurs have come to depend on Jumpstart for support during this challenging startup phase of their businesses.
Without Jumpstart, there would be no Embrace. We wouldn't be here today. We had nothing to start with. We weren't, so my business partner, Alex Kruglich, and I, we're not from around here. In fact, you might be able to tell we're not from around the US at all. And so we didn't have connections here. We'd never done pet insurance before, and we were not even insurance brokers. We even had Jumpstart come to London to help negotiate our arrangement with Lloyd's of London. So Lloyd's of London was our first insurance partner. We're not an insurance company, we need an insurance partner. So Jumpstart, Mark Smith, came with us to help Lloyd's see that it wasn't just two people with a business plan, that it was the whole of Northeast Ohio behind us.
Wireless Environment's David Levine credits Jumpstart for pushing him to recruit a more dynamic board of directors.
Besides the cash infusion which Jumpstart provided to us and the kind of the credibility hit that it gave us, increasing credibility, we benefited from Jumpstart's ability to explain to us the various stages of forming and growing a company and the important milestones and actions that need to be taken.
There are intermediary organizations like Jumpstart working in markets all over the world. Like Jumpstart, they are typically structured as non-governmental organizations. Let's take a look at a couple. Endeavor is an NGO focused on mentoring and accelerating the best high-impact entrepreneurs around the world. Gabriela Magnani is the managing director of Endeavor Argentina.
Well, Endeavor Argentina, as every single office in Endeavor worldwide, our focus is on searching and selecting entrepreneurs, high-impact entrepreneurs, and mentoring them after they have been selected in an international panel. That's basically the one single model that we have in every single country. Now, on top of that, we do a lot of inspiring new entrepreneurship or creating the entrepreneurship culture. So we do some massive events in 8 different provinces of the country. It's more like a TEDx dynamics where we have entrepreneurs, our role models, our Endeavor role models, tell their story to many people so they get inspired, and then we provide some additional technical support with classes or debates on specific subjects for entrepreneurs.
The jobs at companies like Embrace Pet Insurance, Cardio Insight, and Wireless Environment represent the type of employment that communities around the world are looking to create. Job growth at these companies is steady, but no company in Jumpstart's portfolio is yet employing thousands of people. The challenge for Jumpstart and many other intermediary organizations supporting entrepreneurship around the world is to convince governments and donors to continue with their funding over the long term so investments have a chance to bear fruit in terms of job creation and profit. As a result, Jumpstart is being asked by its funders to explore new ways to become self-sustainable, including consulting other communities on venture development and setting up a new for-profit investment fund. The other question that looms for intermediary organizations like Jumpstart is, when they have accomplished enough in support of entrepreneurship, do they still have a reason to exist? In our next lecture, we will look at the role that anchor institutions such as universities play in driving entrepreneurship in a community. See you next time.
Oke.
Oke.
Mas Gundo.
Oke. Ya, jadi mungkin mau bisa di-share yang slide yang itu ya, Mbak Ena, yang ada.
Oke.
Ya, I think intermediary organization seperti yang ada di video itu sekilas tentang Jumpstart, di mana itu adalah inisiatif, the initiative that has been started back in 2004. So it's been about 15 years or so, right? So it's actually I would categorize Jumpstart as a social enterprise because they have they aim to help the entrepreneurs to start and grow the companies, right? So basically they're working in 3 different areas. They call core areas. You can check out the website. It's basically finding the investment, basically going with the philanthropy organization in Northeast Ohio, the Cleveland Foundations and the Burton D. Morgan Foundation, for example. And then on top of this, they are also providing service to the entrepreneurs at the cost, right, in order to sustain probably their operation expense and all that. And then once the entrepreneurs started to go to a different stage, and then they started to look for the other investors or angel investors in order to bring them to a later stage in the entrepreneurs' ventures. So as you can see, the investment is done by providing pre-seed funding, and then connecting to angel investors network, and then connecting them to a bigger network of pool of funds for later stage development. So currently, they've already handled about more than 6,500 companies, and then the portfolio they have basically already invested more than 60 million up to this date, to about 125 startup companies that has been in the portfolio of Jumpstart.
So actually the amount of investment per startup companies are not that large, right? I mean, like it's few thousand $.
Yes, correct. It
Up
depends
to
on
$100,000 probably.
Yeah, right, that's correct. And one interesting, Baena, is also if you look at the video, the Embrace, the pet insurance, which
That's
is
the pet insurance.
yeah, which is basically in life. So this is what's great about the network, because what you're doing is actually maybe connected to someone else doing in other part of the world.
Yes,
it can be a collaboration. Which when I saw the video, I thought I was thinking about co-ID, right?
Yes, and of course among our audience today, there are also some vetpreneurs, we call it veterinarian, who turn into entrepreneurs.
Right. Okay.
Which
then,
they are our distinguished clients.
Right. And then interesting also the work by Endeavor, the two founders, which is Linda and Peter.
In Argentina, yeah, not in the US, yeah.
No. They started this in New York.
Okay.
So they started this idea in New York, but then they aim because it was incepted in '97. I think that was around during the Asian financial crisis.
Yep.
They have this vision of helping the entrepreneurs in emerging markets. So they started with Latin America, and then in Asia, and also now they have office in Indonesia. And if you look at their website, some of the startup, like Kopi Kenangan, and all these could be some of the Endeavor portfolio. So it's very interesting time now for entrepreneurs, because you started to be able to have the opportunity to connect to a larger markets, not only.
That's what I would like to mention. I mean, even in the beginning, maybe it was a coffee shop. Yeah,
Right.
It was just a brand coffee shop with one stall. But then, I mean, that's what my question was about. When you have $10,000 versus $100,000, what are the differences you can make with your coffee shop business?
Right.
Totally different.
Right,
And that's where the intermediary organizations who will connect you with the funding that they collected from the donors and help you to build a scalable business. That's where intermediary organizations can help the entrepreneurs with. So it's no longer that I start a business, I have to fund it by myself. I just want to own it by myself.
Right.
Can you continue doing the business like that? Yes, but after sometimes it goes down. Why? Because it's not scalable enough.
Yes, that's correct.
Because it's not scalable enough.
Yeah. Well, I just want to share a bit on what I did in the previous discussion. For example, in the example of Kopi Kenangan, I think it was inspired by a similar ventures in China, where maybe taking advantage of the localization. Rather than everybody going to Starbucks, for example. They created
Starling. We have Starling actually, Starbucks keliling.
Yeah. And then in China, I think I can't remember the name of the brand, but they create this local brand with a global experience for the people who come and visit, for the customers, and then it become a boom, right? So I think that model can be replicated here as well. So the localization, localization is also one aspect.
Exactly. So. Talking about intermediary organizations, the question is, are they available in Indonesia? Yes, they are. And many of their work has turned into very feasible business today, like Tokopedia, and then Tumi, Clue, and many other. They came with different forms, Some of them are what's so-called angel investors network. You can easily check. I'm not promoting anyone here. That's my disclaimer first. I'm just showing some examples. So Angel Investors Indonesia, Angin, or Angelic Investments. So these are people who created the communities of angel investors, organize it, and then have a structured way to deliver the funding into a very transparent processes for the proposing entrepreneurs. There are also other type of intermediary organizations which we call startup incubators or accelerators. So the difference between the Angel Investors Network and the startup incubators, whereby startup incubators mostly are also giving mentoring and promotion process and also helping them in creating the market for the new business. So creating because sometimes the new startup is bringing up a new innovation, a new innovation that the market is not ready with yet, right? So the market needs to be educated. For example, when the first time we have Gojek, for example, we were not we as a users, as a markets, as a consumers, were not familiar with placing orders. in our handphones, right? Or GoPay, paying with
electronic money,
with electronic money, with e-wallet. So the market has to be created in such a way so that it can be accessed faster. Because otherwise, if the market is not created fast enough, the payback period will be extended as well. So the business is not becoming to the scale that it's needed. There are other types which are mostly venture capital. So they focus more into the capital injections. Sometimes they also preserve one seat of the board in the targeted startup. So let's say the CFO or the CMO has to be someone coming from their side to control the operations of the business until a certain timeline. So these intermediary organizations came into different formats and different approach as well. So for our audience who are actually maybe the one who are needing the investment or needing support to create scale on their business, the question will be then, what are the criteria? Because there's also questions that we receive from social media. What are actually the criteria these investors are looking at? Because there is these organizations receive thousands of proposals, right? And if you join the startup founders communities, for example, sometimes there are so many ideas flying around. So the first thing first is, what is so-called investable ideas? So among thousands of proposals that came in seeking for pre-seed funding or initial funding to the angel investors or donors, whether directly to them or through the intermediary organizations, the big question is, what is the investable ideas? So I copied what you mentioned before, Mas Gundo. Basically, they want to have the impact from the business ideas. Am I correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So the impact here is very important. Well, maybe you can elaborate a little bit, Mas Gundo, on how normally the investors measure the impact of a new business. The future impact, actually the future impact, yeah, because it's not there yet, yeah?
Yes, yeah. Well, impact, when we talk about impact investors, they want to see, especially it's more related to the social enterprise or social entrepreneurship, right? So, and also related to one of the questions that is presented in the social media, like, what if, because I want to relate to this question, I think is a very good question. What are the most appealing factors that can attract donors? What if the business has great social values, but the return of investment is relatively small or long? This is coming from Facebook, okay? It relates to this particular slide. So the impact investors, it depends on what is the aim of the investors, okay? If they want, so-called impact investors are looking into the direct impact that the business is having on the social or the communities, right? For example, you work on fishermen's, or you work on farmers, or connecting farmers to the marketplace, right? So they are willing to wait for the return, because that particular business has a direct impact to the farmers in terms of educating them to grow what type of food or plants, okay, and then educating them in getting the financing to grow a much larger land. So those are the things that a social entrepreneur or social investors, impact investors, are looking. So getting back to that questions, yes, if you find the right, and you have many ways to find out whether the specific investors are aiming for social impact, then you will be having a right partners in order to develop your ideas, right? Now, the other thing, revenue generation, jobs creation, I think it goes along with the business itself, right? For example, the coffee establishment, it will create a new round of vocational training on baristas, and then also the for the waiters, and for the part-time jobs, for example, for university students. So yeah.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mas Gundo. So again, this criteria needs to be well presented in the business plan that the entrepreneurs submitted to the potential investors. Yeah. So bear in mind, so your business plan has to be able to describe how much revenue will be generated, which means that we'll also talk about the operational model of your business.
Right.
Second one is how much jobs will be created. But the good thing is now people are not only counting about the number of employment, but also productivity level. So it's not always about the number. So it's no longer talking about 7,000 employees, no more like that. But it's more about skillful competencies and things like that.
Right.
And last but not least are the values to the larger society. So it's not only just the values for the business itself. So just to pick up the example that you mentioned just now, maybe the other example is there are several startups now who connect between farmers and the buyers. Why? Because farmers are in the rural areas, and the buyers are in the urban areas.
Yes.
Right? So therefore, how to create a marketplace to connect between the two. That's also talking about the values are not only created for the farmers and the buyers, but the values created to the larger society in terms of the economic empowerment. Let's say you are having a business idea on clean ocean, because I know at America is for this month at America is bringing up the theme of ocean life, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not only just about how the fishermen, maybe you can have a business idea on how to optimize the leftover fish harvested from the sea and creating new products, and how to connect these products to the market, whether it's domestic markets or export markets. So maybe the margin in terms of financial margin is small, but the social contribution, the social impact is bigger than the financial margin itself. What's interesting now is for the last 2 decades, investors are familiar now with the social impact measurements, not only the financial impact measurement on the business idea. So please don't worry. You can still present your business ideas in a feasible way by at least these 3 criteria needs to be ticked. And values is not always about financial. There are bigger values than financial. Because why? Because innovation means you create a better value for the larger society, right? If we create an innovative product, but it's only giving benefit for 1 or 2 parties, that's not really, disruptive innovation. A disruptive innovation means you created extended values for bigger society that will be benefited by your business innovation. Before we close this session, I'm also interested to elaborate a little bit when Mas Gundo said that Indonesia is actually being known as one of the most generous country in the world, right?
Number one, numero uno.
Number one. And we do appreciate, for example, when there is a disaster, a natural disaster, or like now for COVID, I do see that people are very generous in giving charity donations. For example, earthquake in Sulawesi or tsunami in Aceh, people are like that. Or also now it's been very growing donation foundations, with multi-region, not only for one particular religion, but many religions also do the same for gathering the donations for what I would, personally, or for example, during the COVID-19, there are many fundraising activities which focusing on providing foods for those who are affected by probably losing the jobs or things like that due to the COVID-19.
Food bank, like a food bank.
The food bank, things like that. I'm dreaming as an individual and as Indonesia, I'm dreaming to see that in the future or shortly we can shift from charity culture to entrepreneurship culture, like what Endeavor principal mentioned in the video, right? So the donations being gathered, not just only for feeding people, but to create them to become economically empowered, so they can feed themselves because they created business, right? No matter how small it is, how maybe home industry, but that will, entrepreneurship culture is very important to make a stronger nation going forward.
I agree.
We cannot continue by tangan di bawah loh, gitu.
Agree.
Please feed me. No, it has to be changed by help me to create the business, help me to accelerate my business, so I can economically being empowered, because empowerment means the cycle continues. Feeding means one time cycle. It's not going to be replicated. So maybe that's my last comment on today.
Okay. Maybe before we wrap up, we go to the third questions from YouTube, and then after that we close this session. So the question is, if we would like to expand our business to other countries, how do we introduce our business to foreign investors, considering different culture backgrounds and maybe their business outlook? Yes, for the moment, I think what we see most is funds coming into Indonesia to capitalize the youth, the middle class, the growing middle class, and so on. But I think I would expect in the coming years, later on when we talk about, you will see more and more about the makerspace revolution that is going on in the manufacturing of America, right, in US. And then you will see more and more that buzzword, makerspace. And then with this, a bridge or some bridges will be built in order to link Indonesia and to other capital markets, like US and so on. So then you started to think about, our entrepreneurs can start to think about a product or a process, innovation that is not only relevant for Indonesia, but is also relevant for the world. So that's when's the time that we can actually have more and more products or innovation coming from Indonesia that is relevant for global society at large.
Thank you, Mas Gundo. A short addition from me also: do your proper research. In any market you want to enter, you have to do your proper research. There's no question about it. And the second one is there is an option to have a joint venture market entry,
right?
Whereby you can partner with the local entrepreneurs,
right?
When when you want to scale up or enter a new foreign territory as your new market. So maybe we are sorry that we exceeded 8 minutes from
8 minutes, yes,
from the time. Thank you very much, everyone, for staying with us today through Zoom, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and also at America website. Thank you very much, Mas Gundo, for your time.
Thank you very much, Bayanla.
We will come back next week, with
next week
more interesting and bigger
anchor institution
and capital market, of course.
And capital market. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, at America.
Thank you at America.
Maya.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Ibu Endang and Bapak Gundo. That was a very enlightening session. I honestly cannot wait for our third session next week. Well, once again, thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Now, the rest of you, please don't go anywhere, because I have the name of the winner for our social media quiz today. Earlier in this event, I asked you guys, is it true or false that the author of Beyond Silicon Valley, Michael E. Goldberg, has spoken about the impact of his MOOC on TEDx? And the right answer is true. He actually has spoken on 2 TEDx's, which is TEDx Heraclion and TEDx Fulbright in Santa Monica, California. And our winner for today is Hairi Rizkana from YouTube. Congratulations, Hairi Rizkana. Now you may be wondering, How can I develop an awesome idea for a place like this? Easy. You can go to our website at www.atamerica.or.id, click Create an Event, and collaborate with us. All proposals coming to us will be reviewed, and your event might be featured here soon. And while you're on our website, you might want to subscribe to our newsletters for weekly event updates sent straight to your inbox. All right, everybody, I think that wraps up this episode. It has been really fun, but unfortunately, we have to say goodbye for now. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at ATAmerica for fun content, event updates, and so much more. And also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Maya Trainer. See you again in our next program. Bye.